Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Boardman Auditorium. I am John E. Boardman, who is the host of it. I started the Boardman Auditorium in the beginning of 2013, so I can speak to the world on the subject of life. I am by far no expert of anything, but I can be a guide for it. The things I say on my show are like applications that can be downloaded into people's mind for them to use as a way of being transformed daily. So, welcome to the Boardman Auditorium.
Hello. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Boardman Auditorium. I'm your host, John E. Boardman, and thank you guys for tuning in. Last week, I had jiu-jitsu, like I normally do on Wednesday and Fridays. Last Friday's class taught me a lesson about the importance of learning to be patient and content in where you're at. And what I learned from jiu-jitsu in the physical world is also applicable in the spiritual world. You see, not only are we just flesh, but we're also spirit. Now, evolution will debate against that and say that the body has no soul, and we are just matter in motion. And they could never answer the question of what happens to when a person dies, because evolution needs evidence. They need visual evidence to support their claims. Yet they don't realize that their theories of how this world began does not have eyewitnesses of the event. For example, the Big Bang Theory. No one claims to see the Big Bang Theory, yet they believe that it exists. Now, how do they interpret the existence of the Big Bang Theory? Well, they'll take their own interpretation on how they perceive this world. Or they may base it upon the interpretation of others, yet the interpretation of others of the Big Bang Theory does not have any eyewitnesses about it. So evolution does not have any idea on how this world begins. So how can they answer the question of what happens to when a person dies? Now, believers know what happens to when a person dies, but evolutionists does not believe in the Bible because they don't believe that a God exists. Evolution realized that their belief is not just science, but faith. And their faith revolves around man being the center instead of being God the center, like the belief of Christians. Now, I went off a tangent about evolution and creation, and that was not really planned. Yet, I want to get back to the point of what I learned in the physical sense that's applicable to the spiritual sense. In actuality, you can learn about being patient and content in the spiritual sense first and apply it into the physical sense and vice versa. Oh, last Friday in jiu-jitsu, I was rolling around with Christian, and he's a really good friend of mine, and he's really good at jiu-jitsu. He has long arms and long legs, and him and I have not rolled in a while. So it was kind of fun to see how much improved Christian has made through his jiu-jitsu game. Well, we were rolling it around, and we started from our knees before we rolled around. We rolled, and he decided to immediately pull guard, and he was attempting to try to get a triangle on me, which was unusual, because most times when him and I roll, he prefers to take the top position. Well, instead, he pulls guard, and I easily managed to pass it and get the mounted position. And for a while, I had it secured. Yet while I was having it secured, I began thinking to my mind of if people were watching this, let's say an actual tournament, they probably would say, you know what, John is just securing the position. He's not trying to do anything. And they might think, wow, this is a really boring grappling match. And I don't know why I started thinking that. And when I began thinking that more, instead of being concerned about trying to secure my position, I began trying to force submission holds. And I made a mistake and gave up the mounted position. But I gave up the mounted position, him and I rolled around, and somehow for a while I ended up in side control. And I was pretty patient. I was able to secure it, and Christian was struggling trying to advance his position, and he was getting tired. Yet I was wanting to advance my position because my thought was thinking of what if. And instead of me being content and patient, I end up trying to force a submission, and taking out that path caused me to lose, and Christian eventually got me into a choke, and I had to submit. And I walk away, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I should have been more patient, because if I'd been a little more patient a little longer, Christian might have got a little more tired. And Christian's got excellent cardio, so you have to be very patient with him. Now, I was reminded of the importance of being content and patient with jiu-jitsu. And I took what I learned, and I can see through studying through the Bible, that's also applicable. Like, when the Holy Spirit guides us to a point into our lives, and He tells us to be still and wait. While doing that, our fleshly desires wants to move forward. So we began to get impatient and not content. Well, in Philippians, Paul talks of learning to be content in where we are at. So we have to learn the same thing. Because if we're not content where we're at, and we try to force our own way doing God's plan, that could lead us to a point where we don't want to go. Kind of like where I was getting choked out by Christian. I didn't want to go there, but I ended up being there because I forced myself. And people that don't do jiu-jitsu may find similar situations where they have this idea and they try to force their way instead of doing God's way, and they end up going to a place where they don't want to go. Now, looking back last Friday, if I could have waited and been a little more patient and content where I'm at, then the result might have been different. And people look back at their lives and they say, you know what, if I was a little more patient and content where God had me, then I might have ended up with a better result. So learning to be patient and content allows us to trust in God, who will give us a better result than what we would have gotten ourselves. So that's what I learned about jiu-jitsu last week. And I thank you guys for tuning into the Boardman Auditorium, and you have a great day.